Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Evening Jones. There it is. If you're watching at theeveningjones.com, I need you to log on. Use Twitter profile, Facebook profile, whatever you got there. Do the job. Go ahead and use that. If you do, you can participate in our chat room. You can also send in your questions. Type them out, put them up on the screen. We can do it that way. Or if you got a webcam and headphones, like I got a webcam and headphones, we can talk like real proper like. I'm going to try to do this for you for about an hour. I had a cold for much of this week, which is why we did not do the show yesterday. So I apologize for, having to delay that situation. But man, nothing make you feel like more of a jerk than having a cold while it's very warm outside. Hold on. I got to put my orthodontics in. Anyway, yeah, it's all gorgeous outside. And you out here just feeling like, ooh, boo, 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 just terrible, right? Like, that's the worst of it. Now, that's the thing, though. When you live here in South Florida, every cold is a summer cold, right? Like, no matter what month it is, no matter what time it is, if you got a cold, it's a summer cold. And a summer cold just makes you feel bad about yourself, right? Like, the summer cold is such a unique affliction because it's just so counter to everything that you expect life to be. That's how you feel having a cold around these parts. And I was done for it, Jack. Like, I try to remember what day that was. We were doing radio. I'm like, I have no idea how in the world we're going to make it to the end of this. Now, you may be wondering why I'm telling you about the fact that I had a cold if I'm not really suffering from said cold right now. A couple of observations. Observation number one. I don't know if anything takes more energy out of you than being forced to breathe through your mouth. Right? Like when breathing through your mouth is your only option. That is one of the more miserable things in life. That's like not really the biggest deal, but it ain't the smallest deal neither. And you just like, right? Like everything's got to come through your mouth. Your mouth get all dry. Your lips get ashy. Because you got all this in and out going through your mouth. Because a lot of that time that you normally spend, breathing through your nose, you spend licking your lips, maintaining your lip situation. Oh man, it's like it's not what's hot in these streets. And I had tried to do radio, man. I had radio to do one day, and I had nothing going through the nose, man. It was all through the mouth. And somebody was like, said something in my Twitter, mentioned something like blow your nose. Like, yeah, thanks, champ. I hadn't thought of that one. This nose blowing thing that you have proposed. Is this like some sort of new technology? He's trying that, bruh. It just wasn't working. You just can't really stop a radio segment and be like, hey, yo, hold on one second. I got to blow my nose right fast. Yeah, I was sneaking in nose blowing breaks too. Like, yo, Shannon, get Shannon on there. And like, man, like it's just not what's hot in these streets. Having talked to people for 3 hours and you can't breathe through your nose. Like, I mean, I feel like we need to start giving people medals when they do incredibly courageous things while they are unable to breathe through their noses. It throws up your whole everything, man. Everything about you just gets distorted when you can't when you can't breathe through your nose, right? So there's that. The other thing is I basically brought up that summer cold so that I could tell you that here it still feels like summer because I know where you are. It is simply cold. Right? Like I got this hoodie on in here right now, in part because the air conditioning in this room blows real cold. But you know what that means, right? We running the air conditioner around here, boy. You heard? You ain't see that coming, did you? Yeah, man. Still pretty nice. Still pretty nice. I could wear shorts to work tomorrow if I wanted to. But I'm more humble than that. Modesty. Learned it in church. How y'all feel about it, though, right? Like I mean, you need to think about it this way, right? Like as I'm doing this here podcast, if you're watching the video, you can see this. I am wearing a hoodie right now. I got my zip up hoodie on, and I got my hoodie on because I like wearing hoodies. They make me feel good. Having a hoodie on is just like it's the close equivalent of feeling like you're loved. Like that's just what the hoodie does for you. It embraces you in a way that no other article of clothing quite does. It just has that effect. And I think the high today is like 80, but I'll wear my hoodies into work now because I miss wearing hoodies. Like if you like wearing hoodies, you get down here and you don't really get to wear hoodies anymore because weather typically dictates whether or not you got your hoodie on. So like, think about it that way. You get to be more comfortable wearing your hoodie, feeling like your clothes love you. Whereas I have to be a little bit warm to get that same warm, loving sensation. See? You hadn't thought about it like that, had you? I be knowing. Anyway, I suppose we can now move on to your questions. I see some people in the chat room hating. Hating. Anyway, let's go to your questions. Which R&B artist made the best breakup pain album? So here's the thing about breakup albums, and I feel like breakup albums are a topic that has been on this podcast before, but it's probably been many years, so we can go ahead and do this again. As I think about it, I've been doing this podcast like 5-6 years now, something like that. But anyway, people really like to talk about their Marvin Gaye Hear My Dear album when they talk about great breakup albums. And I honestly feel like Hear My Dear could have also been retitled The Lamentations of a Sucker. Like, I just felt like he sounded like a sucker throughout that whole record, right? Like, it's got some dope tracks on it. Like, Is That Enough is a dope one. I feel like that When Did You Stop Loving Me one, like, that's okay. Otherwise, man, I just find it to be like overwrought and these like porno beats. Like I just ain't really feeling it. But it's got that fascinating story associated with it where Marvin put the album out because the judge said he had to record an album, give Anna Gordy the proceeds as terms of their divorce. And he just did a record that's pretty much dogging her out track after track after track. She considered suing him for the invasion of privacy that she felt that the whole record was. Like he just took it the whole way. You realize when he gets on track one and it's like, you don't have the right to use the son of mine to keep me in line. Like you realize that this is going to some places that you might not want to go to yourself. Like, and it often goes to those places that you didn't go to without even the courtesy of rhyming. Like he wasn't even really just trying to make this catchy. Like he just vomits all over the album, man. I'm like, I'm not feeling this. This is not what's up. And I worry a great deal about people who talk about how much they like that record because I feel like they kicking like suckers too. Like I'm willing to say maybe Marvin wasn't a full-on sucker. Maybe he was just a sucker in the moment. But I know that if you feel like that's the moment of his that you want to capture and repeat over and over again, he's speaking to your inner sucker because he was at a point in life right there where he was really kicking it like a sucker. And like, if you hear that and you're like, yo, I really relate to what he's talking about right there. I mean, it sounds to me like you a sucker. And I ain't really about that life. So the dude didn't ask me, he asked me what the best was. And I basically just stopped you from bringing up your best and decided just to shit all over. That's the kind of thing I do sometimes, right? Like I know what this thing is that you find near and dear to your heart and that you love so much. And I'm like, yo, let me get that and wipe my booty with it. Well, that just happened. I know. Like I understand if you hear that and you're like, yeah, Bomani, that's why people don't like you. You might be on to something, right? Like I don't really feel like I'm in a position to argue with you about that. Like you might have a point there. Man, Bailey in the chat room says Blood on the Tracks by Dylan's got to be one. And, you know, I've never listened to Blood on the Tracks in that place, but I've been told by people who have done that enough to feel like I don't really want to do that. Like, I don't want to find out how good a breakup album that actually is. Like, one thing I do think, though, is that we have a tendency to think that to make a breakup album, like, good and painful, that it also has to be, like, a miserable listen. And I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, I do think 808s and Heartbreaks is really good, and it's a miserable listen. But as I tell people, I was kind of living a very similar life when that bad boy came out. You know what I'm saying? Like, when people talk about how they don't rock with 808s and Heartbreak, I'm like, yo, I don't even blame you for it, but I'm just telling you, like, if you and your woman split somewhere around the end of 2008, I got a pretty sneaky suspicion that record speak to you, bro. It's supposed to be real, man. It's supposed to be real. Like, I don't really like to listen to it so much no more because I just don't really, there's no need for that. You know what I'm saying? I'm past that. Like, I hope Kanye got past it. It looked like he stumbled into some old other completely different shit, but at least I feel like he got past that moment. Like, he went from that to Amber Rose. I mean, Amber Rose wound up with some misery to it also, but I got to say, like, going from wherever you were at 808s and Heartbreaks to break the ticket with Amber Rose. Like, it might have been worse in the end, but I bet it was better for a little while. Just thought. Anyway, those of you who are familiar with me and my work will know what my answer is to what I think is the best R&B breakup pain album. And I mentioned Dylan in there because I forgot my man said R&B. Somebody said in the chat room, but whatever. But the answer is Adjustments by Bill Withers. And the answer is Adjustment by Bill Withers for a number of reasons. Part of it being that, like, he fluctuates so well on that album, like even sometimes within tracks to being like completely delusional about how nothing is his fault, but completely realistic about how things could have been his fault. And like, there's a great appreciation for it. I think a appreciation and occasional disregard for the humanity of the woman that he is singing about. Of course, a woman that he is alleged to have beaten savagely, which makes things just a little bit awkward when talking about the greatness of this as a breakup album. But as an album itself, it just stands up there. Like, it is a really interesting range of emotion that he goes through. So it's not just a bunch of I'm so sad, I'm so sad. It's like kind of the places that the sad takes him to, some of the contemplations about like what love is and, you know, what you get into, what you get out of it, all those things. Like, I thought it was a very interesting, very simple in the best ways exploration of all those different feelings. Like, they're all there. Like, I don't think there's a stone that's missed. And the thing that is always the case with Withers, and what makes Withers so catalog often so compelling, is he's so clear and he's so direct and it's done so simply that there's a clarity to the work where you never feel yourself coming away like not really being sure where he came from, right? You know what he means. This ain't artistry for the sake of. Like, this is a very direct form of communication, which winds up giving it a different sort of emotional resonance. Like, you feel what the man talking about. The man is not hiding behind no like weirdo metaphors and trying to make his points. He's there. Like, he's comfortable in what it is. He does not have to be dressed up. It's not really intended to necessarily be clever, even though it often could be. But yeah, the Bill with Adjustment, I say y'all check that. It's a win. See what else some of y'all know about a whole lot of breakup albums, by the way. Like, that's just what y'all be doing. Like, I ain't just got like so much of a stack. You know what I'm saying? A bunch of y'all seem to have like a zillion of them. Surprised nobody got in here talking about none of that sad ass Adele. Anyway, to your question. What would your response be if the Trump administration invited you for a meeting? I am floored by how many people have tried to like make this as though this is a question that has any answer other than one, right? So Kanye West, Jim Brown, and Ray Lewis wound up meeting with President-elect of the United States. Okay. Now, you see Kanye walking through Trump Tower, and my question is, who thought calling him was a good idea? Right? Like, I don't care what it is that you wanted to give the appearance of. How is inviting Kanye helping your cause? With whom does it help your cause? Because I feel like the world is kind of down on Kanye right now. I feel like the world has been kind of down like Kanye. I think that a lot of us are a bit worried about Kanye because we know a couple of things about what he's been going through lately. But I just can't figure out who's like, yo, Trump, here's what you need, man. You need to be seen with Kanye. Your Q rating will stinking skyrocket. I don't really, I don't see the logic on that, right? And so from there, I was then left to try to figure out who was compiling this list, who thought, let's get Kanye and Jim Brown up here today, right? Oh, I guess Omarosa, she's from Ohio. I guess she could get Jim Brown there. And see, Jim Brown is a good idea for somebody, for Trump to say that he's talked to. Because think about it, a lot of Trump's rhetoric was about, the black community, the streets are terrible, you got gangs, you got all this stuff. And Jim Brown's out here trying to work on the gang situation, right? And Jim Brown is a dude who'd absolutely show up to meet with Trump. And you know why Jim Brown's a dude who'd absolutely show up to meet with Trump? Because if there are 300 million Americans, there are 300 million people who show up if the president specifically said, I want to meet with you. Everybody out here saying, I wouldn't go do this is a damn lie. Like your initial reaction, if you got an invitation to go meet with the president-elect might be, I ain't doing that. I ain't going to go see him. And then you talk to some people and they'd be like, man, yes, you are. I mean, that's kind of how this goes, man. President sent for you, you're probably going to go. I don't really understand why people feel the need to act big and bold about that. First of all, if you get invited to meet with this dude and you have like a legitimate agenda that you're pushing, you got like something that you really got, like Jim Brown has his own agenda. You have been given an audience to meet with the president of the United States where you will have an opportunity to push your agenda. You go push your agenda. The dude has to tell you no. He might tell you no, even if it's probably tell you no, or he might pay you some lip service, but you at least got to be able to walk in there and say, I tried. You do. Now, is there a possibility that you're going to be used on the back end for a little bit of a photographic dog and pony show? Absolutely. That could happen, but you got to do it. Right? Like there's a small chance of something good coming out of it for you by meeting with the president. But there's a zero chance of anything good coming out of it for not meeting with him. One, the man ain't necessarily the type to just let that slide. Number two, if you do not meet with him, what are you doing? Is to show off? Like tell the world, I stood up to the president. I refuse. I mean, okay, like you can do that. And you'll be a hero for people for about maybe, 12 to 16 hours. But no, the man called, you go, and you see how it works from there. Is it going to be a waste of your time? It is entirely possible that it could be a waste of your time. It certainly could be, but you go. Sorry. Like, that's not where you go for the applause of your partners. You show up. But although I do totally understand the initial impulse of, I ain't going for that. All right. Like, say it to enough people so that people know that's the way you feel. So that when you do ultimately go and meet with the president-elect, you can come back and have people, you can ask them, I ain't even want to go, but they told me I should. Anyway, it wasn't really for me. I did it for the culture. Appreciate the question. Now, Brian said, how would you manage a meeting with Trump without appearing to sell out? Just don't talk about it. Like, go talk to the man and go home. You don't have to talk to anybody else about it. Although it is funny that as I'm talking about this on the podcast, a text message comes in from my brother that says, and I quote, what the fuck is up with Jim Brown and Ray Lewis? Like it just happened as I was doing this. I don't think he's watching either. I think that he just coincidentally happened to see this. I don't know who just told him. Hey, man, it's the little things in life. You know what I mean? It's the little things in life. All right. Appreciate the question. Let me see what else we got here. How do we beat the suit and tie style of Nazism that Spencer is spewing? You talk about Richard Spencer. All right, dude. The Atlantic. Apparently, I've gotten on some email list for the Atlantic. Like, I don't really know what happened, but they just be sending me stuff. Like, they sent me the Coke story on Obama before it hit the streets. They sent me this. It had already hit the streets, but I wouldn't have checked it out if they hadn't sent me the email. So they sent me the email about this 10-minute documentary that they had filmed on Richard Spencer. And, you know, knowing enough about the Atlantic, I was like, okay, if they're going to do this, I think this is something worth seeing. And I say, if I know enough about know something about the Atlantic, basically being, I don't see the Atlantic as being the publication that's just going to be look at this like, wow, look how cute, a well-dressed Nazi, right? Like, I didn't see them as being that. And that's not what they did. They kind of, you know, they allowed him in large part to represent himself in his own words. It wasn't like an attack piece or anything else. I thought they let a lot of what he did just kind of speak for itself. And so here's the thing, and I recommend you check it out. But here's the thing I think you got to get about this Richard Spencer dude. This dude is really, really, really smart. And this dude also seemed to capture or have a bit of an understanding of some things. Well, basically, I thought it was interesting to hear him intellectually kind of break down what he's branding as his conservatism. I thought it was very interesting that he found himself turned off by the flag waving of 9/11, which is an interesting like tack to take, where it's almost like this brand of racism. He's trying to refine it in a way to take it out of the hands of like who you might imagine if you close your eyes as being like the Tea Partier, right? Like this dude doesn't seem like he gonna want Hank Williams Jr. showing up in his situation. Like this ain't about America to him. This is about white. Like the idea that he would look at the response to 9/11, which I mean, a lot of the flag waving things that we did after that, a little bit over the top, right? I think that we can acknowledge that with enough distance. But it's very interesting to hear a white person say that and believe that he's pushing himself, like pushing something that is the right wing. Like this isn't even really about being right wing. Like this is just about white supremacy. Like this is just it. But part of what I find interesting about this dude is he's very honest about what things he finds are and are not race issues. Like what he said about immigration, I thought was interesting. He said this about Trump. He says he was elected because of the immigration issue, which is fundamentally an identity and race issue. Let's be honest, right? This dude is not here coding any of this. Like it's in very plain terms. What I find to be striking about how plain the terms are with which he expresses himself is, to me, he's not saying anything that I find to be necessarily shocking, because my understanding of how race works is kind of reflected by a lot of the things that he's saying. What's getting me is the way that he's saying it is so direct and so transparent that like it's borderline hypnotic, but hypnotic in the way that white people tend to reject racism when it violates some social norms, right? Like when it's expressed in a way that is a faux pas of sorts. However, white people are remarkably tolerant of racist discourse if it is done politely, or if it is done according to some kind of ambiguous, unwritten rules of sorts, right? Like if you don't say any of the wrong words, then you can make it. Like you can push it through. And the thing with this dude is he's saying none of the wrong words, but he's hitting all the money points and he's not trying to be slick about it. Right. He's not trying to be slick about it. Now, we have seen what happens in this society when like white supremacy is encoded. It's not quite encoded in the ways that it had been previously, right? Like there are now some hoops you got to go through to like get your racism through a couple of levels of the membrane. But we've seen what happens when overt white supremacy is allowed to like dictate policy and the likes in this country. And it's really, really, really bad. And it's really, really, really scary. We've seen this. What this dude is ushering in is the overt rhetoric that often happens in advance of encoding the white supremacy. That's why this dude matters a lot, because he's not ridiculous. And it's very difficult to dismiss him as being ridiculous. Very difficult to dismiss him as being ridiculous. And so what you have is a dude who expresses all of the white nationalism while avoiding a significant portion of the like overt hatred in his rhetoric. He can take that message anywhere. And that's a message that'll elicit a whole lot of, well, I don't see what's so wrong about ... Like it's there. And these folks do seem to have gotten themselves a measure of power where they have to be listened to. And the only thing that's ever really stopped people from being overtly racist is you can't do that. Well, why can't I do that? Well, you just can't. You can't do that. Now, the protection of the law, certainly, but in terms like socially, the only thing that's really stopping people from saying a lot of that stuff is, hey, you can't do that. Ain't nobody really telling a whole lot of these people what they can't do anymore. And a cat like Spencer can easily be liberating in that way. So yeah, check that Atlanta documentary of him. Like I say, I found it to be very interesting. Like I have my views on him, but objectively speaking, I found like the content of the message that was being offered there to be interesting. Like worth like thinking about how he's doing it and where it's coming from and his ultimate plan of building a movement of white people all around the world. Like that's what he's going for here. And in comparing it like to the Roman Empire, like he said, he wants it to be like the Roman Empire, where basically all the white people of the world are invited to join in this. Like he's totally sold on this. He has already like carved out this world in his mind where I personally do not exist, right? Where a whole lot of people who are consuming this product right now do not exist, and where they control all the stuff. And he's not trying to pretend like it's anything else. And he's going to be able to get himself in some pretty important rooms in the not too distant future. And historically speaking, we can say that a whole lot of people in this society, if the option is standing up for people like me or backing down to people like them, backing down to people like them has won far more than I wish it had. Appreciate the question. Let's see what else you got here. Hold on. There's actually a lot of good questions. That's the difficulty here. Did you finish the Coates piece and the responses? Yeah, I did read the Coates piece in the Atlantic. As I'll tell you, they sent it to me early, so I checked it out a couple of days before it came out. I haven't had a chance to do the second run through it that I wanted to do because I saw that there was a lot there to try to go through in the story. And so I've had this discussion with a lot of people about Obama over the years. And one thing that I've said, and I think is important to remember about him is you can't really make him who you want him to be. And I think a lot of people rationalize a lot of things that Obama did early in his presidency as, well, he couldn't do this stuff if he wanted to, you know what I'm saying? Because white folks, he got to get a second term. And then he got a second term, and on a whole bunch of that stuff, he was like the same dude that he was before. Like at some point, you got to take somebody as who they want you to believe that they are. Like sometimes you just got to stop and look and be like, yo, this is what it is. And on a lot of things, like I realize, like when it comes to that Black respectability stuff, like that's who Obama is. Obama very often thinks of Black people through the lens of pathology, right? This is just who he is. Like, look, the idea that Obama would choose Morehouse's graduation as a place for the pull your pants up lecture. Like these ain't the cats that you got to talk about this with. But like if you thought that even they needed that lecture, then I mean, this is just this is your vibe on Black people. It is a very paternalistic view of Black people. And for me, it is one of the more frustrating things about him, because in the end, we did get the first Black president. And in a lot of ways, the first Black president, look at me, the same way the last white one did. I mean, there's just no way around that, right? That's what it is. And I bring that up because the thing that I think struck most people coming out of that code speech with Obama was Obama's kind of undying faith that white people in America will do good and will do right by Black people, despite having zero evidence to support this optimism. None. And you would think the last 8 years would give him less faith. Nope. Obama still has all the faith in the world that like somehow you'll continue to push like the hope and change thing and everybody will come around. Except when talking to Coates about things like reparations, he talks about those things in the context of what is politically possible, which is an acknowledgement of a limitation of how far he believes white people are willing to go. Right? So on one hand, there is a boundlessness to his optimism about where things will go in the end that is juxtaposed against a certain pessimism about how far they're willing to go right now, but with no real answer on how long the time frame is that he believes it would take for his optimism to ultimately be supported by action. I don't really get the dude, right? Like, that's what I said. Like, I got to the end of the piece and I could not tell whether I envied him for his optimism or whether I thought that Obama was just a sucker, right? And part of that is with some like biracial identity stuff that I don't really understand because I'm Black. That's just what it is, right? Like I haven't had to consider like whiteness in such a way where I felt like it was like integral to who I was, right? Like I never been in a place where I felt like being white was in my blood, where he grew up around a bunch of white people. But he grew up around a bunch of white people who treated him very well. And that is something to which I can relate. Like I certainly had experience with racist white people growing up, but I got a lot of white people who treated me fantastically in places where you would not think that white people would treat a young Black boy fantastically, but they did. And so like I'm reading the story and it's talking about how Obama can be perfectly comfortable like going into a room with white people because he feels as though when he walks in that they're going to like him and he's going to be able to win them over. And that was something that I could relate to because I absolutely like feel that way. Like you're not going to put me in front of a room full of white people and have me thinking, oh my God, what are these white people thinking about me? No, man, like I feel like I got it like that. I be explaining this in my professional life all the time to people. I think I spent a great deal of my life in doing radio and television, explaining to people like, yo, don't worry, the white people can rock with me. They've done it before and they'll do it again, right? And I relate to that. And I think a lot of that does have to do with I kind of came up with an upbringing where I never was in a situation where I felt like white people would necessarily reject me. You know, at least on an interpersonal level. You know, like even when I get caught up on certain levels of racist stuff, it still kind of surprises me. Like I'm not naive about it, but I forgot like, oh man, you know, like I tend to rock pretty well in these places and under these circumstances. But that personal experience, I don't extrapolate that to mean so much. From that to mean so much, right? But for Obama, like talking about these things with white people is like talking about his mom. It's like talking about his grandmother. It's talking about his uncles. Like it's talking about something completely different. And it's almost like I feel like he needs to believe in the good in the macro in order to justify believing in the good in the micro. Like maybe that's where it comes from, but I just don't see where such a factually oriented man finds so many things to be optimistic about. And you ain't gonna hope your way but so much, right? Because you're assuming a benevolence that in many cases is orthogonal to self-interest. Yeah, I mean, it's really asking a lot in many of these cases. And so I feel like Barack Obama looks at how well these certain people have treated him and believe that this means that everyone will be treated in such a way. And nah, bro, you got to recognize that there's a certain level of special to you. You know, like Obama is in this fascinating place where he is just like everyone and nothing like anyone. Right? And like I feel like I live that in that space to a degree for a number of reasons I'm not really going to go to right now because this ain't really about me. But Obama he's very approachable in a way and very relatable, but it's always known with him, saying this about him and not me, but it's always known with him, you can't be him, right? You get close enough to smell it, but not to touch it. That's kind of what it is. So yeah, I think the piece was like very, very interesting and encapsulated a lot about the last 8 years and, you know, how Trump succeeding Obama, what that means in the larger narrative of the hundreds of years of race in this country. Like, I mean, I think Coach nailed it. Like, I mean, I'm a fanboy to a degree, I acknowledge, but I think he absolutely nailed it. Appreciate the question. Let me see what else we got here. How many New Yorkers do you think were upset that Future was spitting that reel about reasonable doubt? Now, I need you to help me out with something on what Future said about reasonable doubt. And you let me know if I got this wrong. But I believe that Future said that reasonable doubt only became a classic because Tupac and Biggie died. And I'm like, I mean, son, Reasonable Doubt came out in 1996. Tupac died in September, like, of 1996. Like, son, how hot did you want this record to be? I don't I just had to Google this. He says, I'm saying at that time it wasn't hot. They always go back for your classic album. When Nas dropped his first album, it was great then. when If I Ruled the World came out, it was the best then. You have to go back and listen to Reasonable Doubt and think this is the best shit ever. And I'm like, what are you, dude? People were on Reasonable Doubt as soon as it dropped. It wasn't a mainstream record, right? But people who was really about rap at that point, there was no mystery to whether or not people was rocking with Reasonable Doubt. Look, as soon as you got to the K Knock the Hustle video, we knew what time it was. The only lag then was like the lag that it took for records to catch on back in that time. But if any of those, if Pac is still around, if Big is still around, Jay-Z, I can't say Jay-Z necessarily becomes Jay-Z because you think of Jay-Z in part as being on top of the game. Like there would have been a different peer group up there with him, certainly, but he still would have been huge. And there's just no doubt about it. It's like Jigga cold as hell. Like, I mean, that's where this is. Jigga's cold as hell. The thing about Jigga, though, also a Reasonable Doubt is the part that I think took a little bit of time for people to catch on with is if you ever talk to anybody who's like an East Coast drug dealer in that time period, Reasonable Doubt is like their shit. Like there's a level of appreciation that you do have for it once you talk to the people who were actually living that life and they speak to the veracity of what it was that he was doing. Like, it's an incredible piece of work. But I don't recall, I mean, it was not like, he didn't become triple platinum Jay-Z, no. But back then, the people who determined whether or not a record was a classic was a much smaller group. Like, we wasn't really worried about what the mainstream was saying in terms of determining a classic. Like, the narrow community of, I mean, narrow isn't the right word, but the community of people who were concerned with those things made those decisions. Like the people who were like, yo, Hard Knock Life came out, I got to go back and check out Reasonable Doubt. Those aren't the people who determined whether or not it was a classic. Just like those people didn't determine that Volume 2 was a classic. Because Volume 2 is not a classic. Reasonable Doubt is. Volume 2 is not. Volume 2 sold so many more copies, but it's not a classic. Why? Because selling all them tapes isn't what made it it was going to be what makes you the classic. That's how it goes. So I just felt like Future being like, yo, until these other two dudes died. Well, I mean, they died pretty damn quick, Future. It wasn't like Biggie died in 2001 and then all of a sudden Reasonable Doubt became a classic. Appreciate the question. Let's see what else we got here. Someone asked if that's a James Brown bobblehead. That's Edgerrin James, whose hair is as opposite James Brown's as one could imagine. Oh, damn, what happened? Oh, here it is. Are black men and women as divided in real life as they appear to be on Twitter? This morning, my timeline was in shambles. So it doesn't take much for like the black men versus black women thing on Twitter to like kind of jump off. But I don't know what happened to the question, by the way, because I tried to answer it and then it disappeared. But I do think it is very much so worth noting and often forgotten here that men in general treat women horribly. Now, it becomes a particular discussion when this discussion is between black people, because black women absolutely have defended and championed black men repeatedly over and over again in the face of all kinds of stuff. And you can't blame any rational black woman for feeling some sense of betrayal for what happens when it's time for them. It hasn't come back the other way. And so I do think that you have something fairly particular in this where there is the general thing of men treating women badly, but there's the particular element that black women have treated black men pretty damn well. and a little reciprocation would be nice. And they receive like not too much of it. And then there is just this whole like group of black men who get really, really mad when anybody mentions this, right? Or just very defensive of anything bad that anybody says about black men. And hey, man, men generally speaking, but black men in particular, because of the conversation that we're having, need to just be honest about the fact that in spite of where you may be on the race hierarchy, you absolutely have a place in this gender thing that puts you in a position of privilege. So, like, don't act like the white people that you say you got so much beef with when the situation has changed and made analogous to gender. Like, don't do that. I mean, I just don't. I don't know why it's so difficult for people to grasp this. I really, really don't. Right, but you can't blame black women for being sick and tired of it because somebody got to look out for them, and it like consistently hasn't been us. Like I'm not pretending like I'm the hero that's doing everything for everybody, but I ain't got to lie about what the damn deal is. Appreciate the question. Let me see what else we got here. My cousin just found out the kid he was raising is not his. The kid is now 3 and his girl is in baby please mode. He asked me what he should do, so I'm here asking you what I should tell him to do. Thanks. Guys, I feel like I need to read this question out loud again just to make sure that everybody understands what has been put before me. Because, I mean, my cousin just found out that the kid he was raising is not his. The kid is about 3 now, and his girl is in baby please mode. He asked me what he should do, so I'm here asking you what I should tell him to do. I don't know. I I have no idea. I mean, because like you're attached to the kid now. You rock with the little homie. You'd be kind of like, abandoning him. Except she got to go. But the problem is, it's not your kid. So I don't feel like you get to like dictate any terms to allow you to still kick it with your. Honestly, man, I'm like just kind of touched and honored that you would think that I might have any fucking idea what to do. Right? Like you give me credit for having a wisdom that I simply do not possess. And I'm honestly honored by that. Thank you. Thank you. Because I don't know. Damn. Everybody saying poor kid. I mean, kind of. That kid might be the luckiest kid in the world. He got 2 daddies. Y'all always acting like the problem is somebody ain't got one. He got more daddies than he need. He can loan it. He can loan a daddy out to one of the kids at the daycare who might need one. But that dude, bro, that's an L. Whoo, that's an L. Damn. How did he find out, by the way? Like, was there a blood test involved? Did the boy start looking like just like somebody else? That's where I am curious. Like how did my man Keenan, you still here? How did my man find out that the baby was not his baby? Oh, a medical emergency. Damn, so even worse. There's like a medical situation and you got to cope with that. Eee. Suddenly I'm looking at every problem I got in my life through like a completely different lens. Wow. I don't I don't want to like cut you guys short, but I don't really think there's anything I can do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the Evening Jones. We do this every week. Lance Gilliam handles everything behind the scenes. If you miss anything live, check out the Evening Jones podcast. Subscribe at the iTunes store. Subscribe at Stitcher Radio. Check us out at SoundCloud. We're also at Google Play. I just gotta go. Damn.